distinguished speakers on innovative approaches to achieve better recovery outcomes in urban areas. When all of our panellists have presented, we will then, subject to time, take some questions from participants, and then we'll conclude the session. We know that many urban areas are becoming hotspots for disasters due to population growth, increasing and unplanned urbanization, environmental challenges including climate change, biodiversity loss and pollution, and other anthropogenic pressures. The IPCC has told us that the key and emerging global climate change-related risks are concentrated in urban areas. Climate change is expected to exacerbate urban risks due to exposure to hazards, socio-economic vulnerabilities, poor governance, and other factors which we're going to hear about today. Cities present unique challenges for recovery. Since asset concentration and resource utilization are higher in cities, the disruption of critical infrastructure and essential services after a disaster can cripple the functioning of society and derail the prospects for achieving the SDGs. We need innovative solutions to prevent cities from being locked in unsustainable development pathways, creating new risks and further being exposed to future risks, especially strategies and long-term recovery that can foster resilience, environmental sustainability, and socio-economic well-being of people and communities. So with that backdrop, I think we can get started, and allow me to introduce our first speaker, Ms. Kazuko Kori, who is the mayor of Sendai City in Japan. She will share with us Sendai City's disaster risk reduction initiatives via a pre-recorded video.
Hello to all participants at the World Reconstruction Conference. I am Kazuko Kori, the mayor of the city of Sendai. It is my great pleasure to speak here today about our city's DRR initiatives. The city of Sendai sustained serious damage from the Great East Japan earthquake, which occurred on March 11, 2011. I would like to use this opportunity to express my deepest gratitude for all of the kind support that we have received from people all over the world until now. Thanks to your assistance, reconstruction is also progressing in the coastal area, which was damaged by the tsunami. This is how the coast looks today.
I've been searching for this moment, one that I can call my own. I've been searching for this moment, running free, I'll find my home. I've been waiting for this moment. This time I'll do it on my own. Countless trails that I have taken, find myself in the unknown.
Throughout our recovery progress, we have been implementing guiding principles, including Build Back Better, from the Sendai Framework for DRR. The Sendai City Basic Plan provides local city planning guidelines, which aim to create a sustainable and resilient urban environment. In addition to concrete BRR measures, we are also incorporating environment plan and anticipation of climate change. We collaborate with Tohoku University and the private sector, engaging issues related to DRR and pursue resilient city planning. Moving forward, we will continue to create a disaster resilient and environmentally friendly city, which is resistant to disasters and sustainable. We contribute to promote the Sendai framework for DRR and hope to learn from other regions' initiatives. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much to Mayor Corey for sharing the lessons from Sendai City's recovery from the Great East Japan earthquake and tsunami. I will now move to our next speaker, Professor Patatop, who is a professor and the former head of the Central Sulawesi Province Development Planning Agency. I now invite Professor Top to take the floor.
Thank you, moderator. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I am very sorry today. My English is not so good, so let's me to speak of bahasa Indonesia in Indonesia. Bapak dan Ibu yang saya hormati, saya kira-kira apa tantangan terutama tentang pemulihan, masalah pemulihan di Kota Palu baik COVID maupun bencana alam maupun bencana non alam. Saya akan bicara pada 5 persoalan. Yang pertama itu latar belakangnya. Where is the slide? Halo? Nah, okay. Next slide please. Oke, saya akan bicara 5 hal. Ya, yang pertama latar belakang, yang kedua tantangannya, lalu apa yang bisa dipelajari, rekomendasinya dan summary-nya. Yang pertama, next slide. Yang pertama, sebagaimana Bapak dan Ibu tahu, ada terjadi bencana, 2 kali bencana kalau untuk Sulawesi Tengah. Yang pertama itu adalah bencana alam, tsunami, likuifaksi, dan gempa bumi. Jadi tsunami sudah pernah terjadi di Aceh, terjadi juga di Sulawesi Tengah. Likuifaksi yang cuma terjadi di Sulawesi Tengah, terutama di Kota Palu. Lalu habis itu disusul dengan persoalan COVID-19. Nah, dalam kasus tsunami itu, dalam kasus tsunami dan likuifaksi itu ada 2.087 orang yang meninggal. Kemudian 1.663 khususnya di Kota Palu. Jadi sekitar 68% itu di Kota Palu. Ada 42.000 lebih rumah yang rusak, 422 bangunan sekolah yang rusak, ya, dan 22 fasilitas kesehatan yang hancur. Kerugiannya kira-kira ditaksir 24 triliun lebih rupiah. Ya. Nah, kerugian ini dihitung dalam 5 sektor. Yang pertama itu adalah perumahan, sektor perumahan, kemudian infrastruktur, sosial, dan ekonomi. Ini efek dari yang pertama bencana tsunami dan likuifaksi yang ada di Sulawesi Tengah. Yang kedua tentang COVID-19. COVID-19 ini juga sudah mematikan orang 1.722 orang dari 50.049 kasus sampai per 2 hari kemarin di Sulawesi Tengah. Kemudian sampai saat ini kita punya indeks kedalaman kemiskinan juga tambah parah dan tingkat pengangguran terbuka konsumsi terutama di daerah perkotaan itu ya menurun drastis. Nah, Bapak dan Ibu sekalian yang saya hormati, apa kira-kira tantangannya kalau misalnya saja bencana alam, ya? Yang pertama ini kalau di Sulawesi Tengah bangunan yang tidak ramah dengan gempa. Jadi karena mungkin keterbatasan ekonomi, bangunan ya tidak terlalu kuat, kira-kira begitu. Kemudian yang kedua, seharusnya peta pembangunan itu seharusnya dikaitkan dengan peta bencana. Jadi harusnya sebenarnya mengadop juga peta bencana. Jadi kalau misalnya di beberapa daerah di Indonesia terutama Sulawesi Tengah yang rawan gempa, seharusnya itu mengadop misalnya peta kerawanan bencana, ya. Terus yang ketiga, ini yang jadi masalah ya di kota-kota, di perkotaan terutama di Sulawesi Tengah itu. Sorry, next slide. Sorry. Next. Ya. Next, please. Sorry, before. Oke, sebelumnya. Ya, oke, thank you. Nah, kemudian ada juga yang jadi masalah misalnya penyediaan air karena ada tumpang tindih kewenangan antara pemerintah Kabupaten Donggala misalnya dengan Kota Palu. Itu misalnya dalam kasus penyediaan air di tenda-tenda atau misalnya juga masalah penyediaan lahan ya, terutama untuk meresettlement penduduk ke tempat pengungsian itu juga bermasalah ya. Baik tempat pengungsian sementara maupun tempat hunian tetap. Lalu untuk COVID-19 itu yang pertama ada penurunan konsumsi terutama di daerah perkotaan. Jadi ekonomi tidak jalan ya karena akibat pandemi COVID-19 maupun dengan adanya gempa dan tsunami. Kemudian ada bantuan sosial, bantuan langsung tunai yang kita berikan kepada penduduk baik itu dari pemerintah daerah, pemerintah pusat maupun negara donor. Kemudian kita harus merescheduling kegiatan karena anggaran yang begitu terbatas dan gempanya tiba-tiba. Nah, ada beberapa hal yang kita bisa lakukan. Pertama itu ya harus protokol berdasarkan manajemen kebencanaan. Kemudian yang kedua mengadop ya local wisdom. Misalnya saja kalau misalnya ini harus lari ke tempat yang tinggi kalau ada bencana. Dan yang ketiga misalnya saja memperbaiki ya kebutuhan pokok masyarakat sehingga kalau ada gempa misalnya tidak terjadi pendarahan. Jadi penjarahan atau pencurian karena kadang-kadang tiba-tiba kalau tidak ada pasokan masyarakat misalnya ya mereka akan mencuri tiba-tiba. Nah, itu kira-kira terakhir rekomendasi tentu ini pembiayaan karena keterbatasan anggaran harus ada inisiatif financing. Kemudian yang kedua ada kira-kira perencanaan lintas sektor dan lintas daerah terutama untuk kebutuhan pokok ya. Kemudian yang ketiga penyediaan lahan dan yang terakhir tentu komunikasi. Saya kira itu yang saya sampaikan dengan waktu yang sangat terbatas. Sorry. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Top, for that and for sharing the reflections from Polar-Cities recovery. Let's now move to our next speaker, which is Elizabeth Riley, who is the Chief Executive of the Caribbean Disaster and Emergency Management Agency. Ms. Riley, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good afternoon to everyone. So today I'm going to speak on responding to recovery challenges in the urban environment from a SEDEMA perspective, if I can get the presentation pulled up. Thank you. I don't think that was the correct one. Okay, so I'll start speaking while the presentation comes up. and hopefully it'll catch up. All right, so if you go to the next slide. So SEDIMA, we're an agency of the Caribbean community, and we represent 20 Caribbean states, which are all small developing states, not all islands, but have characteristics of the islands. 3 of them are in fact continental. And you will note from the slide, we have a big geographical space where we operate. And what that means is that we have a diversity of hazards that affect those states, but we also have very diverse capacities across those states as well. In terms of the hazards, we have urban areas which are affected by a range of impacts, from seismic-related impacts, storm surge, because most of our cities are coastal. There's a potential threat as well, of course, for tsunami, cyclonic activity and severe weather events. And of course, most recently, we had COVID-19 and still experiencing COVID-19, and biological hazards are a reality in the Caribbean as well, where we have diseases like dengue being endemic to some of our states. Next slide. So to give you a picture of the urbanization in selected participating states, this is a graph derived from UN Habitat Statistics in 2020. And on the left-hand side is the percentage urbanization, and across the x-axis are the Caribbean states that are named. So you will note that we have some countries with very high levels of urbanization, like the Bahamas, just over 80%, Dominica in the range of about 70%. Others are lower, but just to say that the overall trend since the 1960s is that the percentage of urbanization within the region is increasing, and it continues to do so. Next slide. So just a snapshot of 2 of our states that have been impacted. The Dominica, this is a photo from Roseau, immediately in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria in 2017 from cyclonic activity. And on the far right, many of you remember these images of the Presidential Palace, Port-au-Prince in 2010 earthquake. Next slide. So it's useful for us to talk a little bit about the characteristics affecting urban recovery in the Caribbean. And the first point is that the scope of the impact from hazards is usually broader than within the urban areas because of our small geographical size and the fact that the hazard extents are usually quite significant geographically, particularly if you're talking about cyclones, severe weather events, etc. In addition, poverty is an underlying factor, a driver of risk, as you well know. And in the Caribbean, recent statistics range from 12.5% up to 37% or over within urban areas, within the countries as a whole, And we know that the hazard events exacerbate previous inequalities. In addition, we have a phenomena of informal settlements, as I'm sure you see across many areas in the world, which are characterized by poor construction practices, limited compliance with building codes, and these settlements are often associated with areas that are at high risk to hazard impacts, and we see this across the Caribbean space, and this is not unusual because we know that the poor tend to live in highly vulnerable areas. In addition, there's the issue of land tenure and land rights. This is a factor within our urban areas, and it has posed challenges to urban recovery. In fact, it's well documented in the case of Haiti in the aftermath of the earthquake in 2010. Also, I just wanted to mention that in some of our states, the services are very much centralized in the urban areas, usually in the main town, and also government services. And we know that government buildings, for example, are often not insured in the CARICOM context. Next slide. So when we're talking about resilient recovery, we had a conversation in the region in 2018 in the aftermath of the 2017 hurricane season, where we were impacted very severely by Hurricanes Irma and Maria. And the heads of government requested SEDEMA to prepare really a definition of resilience within the context of CARICOM states. And we worked with partners to come up with what you see on screen, where there are 5 interrelated pillars looking at social protection, not just for the vulnerable, but also for marginal persons who live pretty much on the line, just above the line, and shocks tend to send them below that line. Enhancing economic opportunity is an important feature of what we're trying to create in resilient recovery. Safeguarding our infrastructure, because we see a lot of losses in those areas, environmental protection, and of course, operational readiness and recovery. And there's a wide enabling framework to support the recovery activities as well. Next slide. So on the final slide, I just want to talk about how we can improve recovery in urban areas, and just to throw 4 thoughts out there. One is really about the institutional frameworks for recovery. In the Caribbean, we have adopted the area of recovery within SEDEMA just last year, fully as a functional area of the agency, and we're investing a lot in capacity strengthening for recovery. And one of the first deliverables that we've prepared, which is being discussed at our ministerial level just next month, is a model national recovery framework, which looks at a range of issues, including social inclusion in recovery. And it's really to position countries to have a guidance for ex-ante recovery planning. We also feel that the improving recovery in urban areas is really about grasping the opportunities. And it's an opportunity for addressing underlying drivers of risk, looking at issues of locational vulnerability. Can we take that opportunity for relocation of persons who are located in vulnerable areas, for example? It's about social inclusion and gender-sensitive recovery as well. And we have very high statistics of female-headed households. St. Vincent and the Grenadines, which, as you know, was impacted by the eruption of the La Soufrière volcano just last April, has 52% female-headed households. And climate change and hazard resilient infrastructure is the final point. And really the opportunity there to have this type of work supported by appropriate emergency procurement procedures, which allow us to move the recovery processes a bit faster. So thanks very much for the opportunity to contribute, and happy to take any questions after.
Great, thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Riley. That was great. Okay, we'll move on to our next speaker, and I'm pleased to introduce Mr. Arne Jansen, who is an urban environment specialist with the Cities Alliance, and he's going to be joining us remotely. So if we can bring up.
Hi, Stephen.
Yes, over to you. Yes, thank you. Floor is yours.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, thank you, Stephen, and thank you, first of all, to the government of Indonesia and the United Nations Office for Disaster Risk Reduction for having us today and for organizing this, we think, also crucial exchange. I also prepared some slides, if we can put them on. Thank you. Today I want to share some of our experience when it comes to recovery challenges in the urban environment, with a special focus on the urban poor and the case of secondary cities and the role of informality. We also heard already from Ms. Riley about informality, which I can just underline from our experiences. Next slide, please. Yeah, let me briefly tell you who we are. The Cities Alliance is a global partnership with a diverse membership of national governments, international organizations, NGOs, civil society, and local governments. We are founded in 1999 with Nelson Mandela as our first chairman. Our mission is to improve the lives of urban populations by delivering innovative solutions to urban poverty in cities where it matters the most. Our vision is we provide technical expertise and grants to local and national actors to deliver programs that directly address urban poverty and gender inequality in cities. We also leverage the collective expertise of our partnership to catalyze new urban thinking and solutions at a global level. We are hosted by the United Nations Office for Project Services, UNOPS, so as such, also part of the UN family. Let me now briefly tell you what we do. Could we go to the next slide, please? As you can see here, we put urban poverty front and center of our activities. But we also work through cross-cutting themes, as you can see here, with resilience and gender, for example, migration. We operate on different levels. So we have implementation on the, let's say, city or country level, where we do capacity development and provide technical cooperation for city administrations. We also pilot inclusive and partnership-based projects, bringing thereby together local decision makers as well as civil society, which is an important part to actually connect local societies and decision makers to get also in the informal sectors they're involved. We then work on the global level, and we funnel the evidence that we get from the local level in our implementation by advancing new tools and practices, and also through advocacy and, for instance, like here through this forum, of course, to discuss and to bring these important points to a bigger audience. We focus on, as I said, we focus on urban poverty, but our second focus, let's say, is secondary cities and informality. And let me briefly tell you why. So as you all know, cities around the world are the main drivers of trade, innovation, as well as local development. However, not enough attention is being paid to the fastest growing urban areas of all, and the ones with the greatest potential actually to shape our urban future, which is smaller or medium-sized cities, or like we call them, secondary cities. A secondary city, I mean, apart from their size, more important is the function and geographical location within the national systems of cities. So a secondary city can still be a very large city, but within the country or within the system of cities, it is not, let's say, the one with the first priority from the national government and the one that is maybe gets less attention, let's say. But however, secondary cities are expected to take the main share of urban growth until 2050. And the reality is that most of this growth will take place informal. So not very much planned. We got this example from the Caribbean, also a lack of capacity from within the cities to manage this growth. So without a significant shift in the mindset of decision makers, especially on the national and international level, by recognizing the fact that informal settlements and the informal economy are an integral part of the city, many global, national, and local development goals quite simply cannot be met. So we have to acknowledge facts on the local level. We are only able to reach these international goals we set ourselves by recognizing what's going on the local level. So I want to move on to the next slide. I will briefly give you an example of COVID in secondary cities and our learnings so far. So COVID-19 has been somehow what we think the canary in the coal mine. So it warns humanity that cities are poorly prepared for global scale shocks to public health and livelihoods. We have seen that secondary cities are in a relatively weak position to manage and recover just on their own. However, we also think this is a window of opportunity that currently exists to reconsider urban strategies and to question the assumption around the cost and benefits of let's say, density of a city, agglomeration. So these are all things we have to rethink. COVID-19 has also increased the awareness that human life will be affected by higher risk and rapid change, and that governments and societies need to be better prepared in order to manage uncertainty and more effectively when events like this arise. But we also need to address other big threats. And I'm working, for instance, mainly in Cities Alliance on the topic of climate change. And this puts us exactly in the same shoes. It's a global threat, but with local repercussions. And we have to start solving this, or at least the adaptation side has to be done on the local level. We also think that, taking the example of COVID-19, that secondary cities need to play a key role to improve the management, development, and use of hard and soft infrastructure within their city. So they need to get the resources and the capacity to directly react to these challenges. Looking a bit ahead of COVID, what are some learnings from our work? Can you please go to the next slide? We heard from the Caribbean already about the resilience approaches, and this is actually very much in line with also our findings. So we see resilient as the ability to anticipate, prepare for, and respond to events, trends, or disturbance related to climate change. So if you see here, cities and especially the rapidly growing secondary settlements in the global south are critical to the local and global environment. And we see that these are the important places where change need to happen, and we have to, our mission is also to support these cities in a way of partnership, right? Because they are also local solutions that work. The local leaders often knows best what are the local circumstances. So we at Cities Alliance, we also provide kind of a platform to bring in this new knowledge, but also to have a kind of partnership with each and every stakeholder on the city level. And this includes for us the informal communities. And so by building trust between informal communities and then the local leaders, we saw good results coming out of this. So we see a city as a, let's say, system. So in order to strengthen the overall system, you have to start with the weakest link, which is in or what we heard also before, often the informal settlements. So how is this implemented? I can give you examples in the discussion later. Let me just briefly summarize. So we need to build smarter, more equitable and inclusive communities. We need to invest in local resilience to cut also future costs. And we need to focus on also co-benefits of a sustainable development. So to say, to sell the work that needs to be done also better and showcase that there are benefits connected to it that helps the overall city. So by this, let me close. So as I said, investing in local measures, especially on climate adaptation for us, is something that needs to be showcased on the international level, that this will help to reduce cost in the future there. I hope I could give you a brief insight into our work and our findings, and I'm happy to discuss later with the panelists. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Janssen, for explaining to us why secondary cities are important in highlighting the role of urban poor in building local resilience. Let's move to our next speaker. I'm pleased to introduce Dr. Saini Yang, who is a professor at Beijing Normal University, and she's also joining us virtually. There we are. So the floor is yours, Dr. Yang.
Thank you, Chair. It's a great pleasure to join the session, and may I have my slides? Thank you. All right, so I would like to take this chance to share the experience in the reconstruction of Wenchuan earthquake in China. And on May 12, 2008, a magnitude 8.0 earthquake occurred in Wenchuan province. It caused more than 87,000 mortality and affected more than 20 million people. And there are a huge amount of critical infrastructure losses, and the direct economic loss surpassed 121 billion US dollars. So the demand for reconstruction is really huge. Next slide, please. All right, so Build Back Better is one of the 4 priorities promoted by the Sendai framework. And when we're talking about Build Back Better, it at least includes 3 parts. So effective implementation of reconstruction, community recovery, and integrating risk reduction in reconstruction and recovery. So for catastrophe like a Wenchuan earthquake, it is extremely challenging. More than 50 cities and prefectures need to be reconstructed. And what is the solution to Build Back Better? Next slide. So here are some pictures of the damaged city, and the set of pictures on the left was taken in the epicenter of the earthquake, which is in Town, and the set of pictures on the right was taken in another heavily affected area called Hombai Town. And on the top are the scene after reconstruction taken in 2013, and the bottom 2 are the scene right after this disaster. Next slide. And here I show some of the data of socio-economic recovery of Sichuan province. We can see that the GDP per capita, population, road mileage, college enrollment, hospital beds, they are all increasing steadily after 2009. This number shows that the entire region experienced very strong recovery in the past 14 years. And we can say that, yes, Sichuan province, they suffered most from the earthquake, but it bounced back. Next slide. So in the process, reconstruction policymaking is always the first step. So in less than 1 month's time, the State Council established the post-disaster reconstruction planning group. And within 3 months, the state overall planning for post-Wenchuan earthquake restoration and reconstruction released for public consultation. And in less than 2 years' time, the State Council and the Sichuan province issued 105 policies to support the process. And there are at least 3 levels of plannings. We have the overall planning, which is a comprehensive picture, and there are special planning for specific fields, and the reconstruction planning for disaster areas, which are issued by affected provinces, cities, and counties, which provide detailed contents and the strong applicability. Next slide. So next slide, yes. So the source of funding is always an issue. According to the overall planning, the total funding demand is about 1 trillion Chinese yuan, which is about 0.15 trillion US dollars. This is a huge number. So domestic special loans are the largest source of funding, and the central government implemented discount policy for restoration and reconstruction loan in disaster areas. And besides the special loan and the central government funding, the counterpart support program funds, they rank third in all funding resources, which is about 10% of the funding demand. Next slide. The progress of the reconstruction proceeded in a surprisingly effective pace. So about like 1 year after the release of overall planning, 17,800 projects were completed, accounting for 41% of the planned projects. And by the end of January 2010, 21,900 projects completed. Then by the end of April 2011, which is less than 3 years after the earthquake, 38,800 projects completed, accounted for 94% of the total planned projects, and about 900 billion Chinese yuan investment will complete, accounting for 92% about the total planned investment. Next slide. The one highlight in this reconstruction of Wenchuan earthquake is a counterpart support program. And the State Council proposed this program and following this Wenchuan earthquake. And it requires one province for one severely affected county to accelerate the recovery and the reconstruction. So this program designated 19 provinces and the municipality to support the reconstruction and the recovery of the severely affected counties and the cities in Sichuan, in Gansu, and the Shanxi province. And this provinces and the municipality will provide no less than 1% of their fiscal income for 3 consecutive years. So this program, together with other fiscal, taxes, land, financial policies form the comprehensive policy to support the Wenchuan earthquake reconstruction. So next slide, please. The key objectives and components of this program includes, but not limited to, the provide planning, locationing, architectural design, expert consultation, engineering, construction, and supervision services to build back and repair houses, public service facilities, and critical infrastructures. Especially, this program encourages enterprises to invest in the reconstruction of factories, invest in this commercial circulation, and to participate in their operation. So this counterpart supporting program ultimately enabled affected localities to learn the lessons and insights from the experience of other cities and regions in China. So this program really highlights the people-centered approach and ensures that the critical infrastructure reconstruction can be adequately prioritized so that it can provide service to the people. We believe that the reconstruction of Wenchuan earthquake provides an optional solution for large-scale disaster recovery, not only to China, but also for the world. And for more information, please check our report sponsored by GFDRR. It's called Learning from Experience, Insight from China's Progress in DRM. Next slide. So with this information, I would like to conclude my presentation, and thank you for your listening, and I welcome your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Yang, for taking us through Wenchai's recovery and reconstruction. That was very helpful. So our final speaker joining us is Ms. Ares Gabas Masib, who is the head of the Urban Resilience Department of the Barcelona City Council. She's also joining us virtually, as you can see. So the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for the invitation. And I'm going to try to share with you the urban resilience implementation from the municipality perspective and our experience in Barcelona. And if you could share my presentation, please. Okay, so next slide. I'm going to start a bit with a bit of background. And we can say that the city has always responded to challenges and crises. Actually, the current shape of the city was designed in the 19th century as a response to a public health crisis and the spread of the epidemics. That was the basis of the Eixample plan. Also in the 90s, due to we have a Mediterranean climate which is prone to heavy rainfalls and drought. We have a very irregular rain pattern, and during the 90s we had there were a lot of issues related with flooding, and the sewage master plan incorporated a series of measures and investment in order to upgrade the infrastructure to drastically reduce the risk of flooding. So retention tanks were built, and also other sort of infrastructure improvements that have been progressively implemented until today. But in the first decade of the years 2000, the city had a series of crises in a very short period of time, affecting critical infrastructures and compromising the continuity of services and function, and even putting at risk the population in some cases, as there was a neighborhood or part of the neighborhood collapsed due to the extension works of metro line. Also, we had a very severe drought period between 2006 and 2008, and also a blackout event in 2007. That because electricity is one of the services that most dependencies generates in the rest was very critical because of the severity of the episode and the long time it lasted. And all this was the genesis of actually the resilience program, which is now has been evolving and is run by the resilience office of the city. And this was the first approach to resilience risk reduction implementation project. So the idea was to implement projects to reduce the risk, and also very based on stakeholder engagement, because we acknowledge that the competencies and the jurisdiction in the city are very distributed. So Barcelona as a capital city has a lot of jurisdiction in many areas, but not all of the things that matter in the city are run by the municipality. So all the different stakeholders from the private sector, but also the public one and other areas in the city need to be involved in the process. So this is the basis of the current model that we have nowadays, and this is, even though the model has been evolving, this is still valid up to date. So if you can go to the next slide, please. So Barcelona's, as I said, since 2014, we have, the program started in 2009, but since 2014, we have a resilience office. We were one of the first cities in Europe, actually, maybe the first one to have a resilience office. And I wanted to stress some notes on the mission and the vision, and how we approach resilience in Barcelona. The first thing is that we have a proactive approach. We want to understand risk, and we want to reduce risk, not only the current, but also the plausible ones in the future. Also, it is people-centered and focused on the most vulnerable layers of the populations, because we know risks don't affect the same way all the population. There are some collectives, some groups that are usually the same, regardless the risk we are talking about, that are generally more exposed and more and worse positioned to face risk or critical episodes, and also to recover and overcome them. And also the sense that resilience is a continuous improvement process. So building capacity is essential, and integrating resilience in all the processes of the city. So from operational and practical ones to planning and transformation projects of the city. So resilience by capillarity needs to be, this criteria need to be integrated in the logic of all these processes that take place. And also what I was mentioning in the beginning. Next slide, please. Shifting from, this is what how we understand resilience as first preventing, and if not possible, minimizing the impact of risk, no matter whether they are shocks or stresses, by maintaining the essential functions of the city and allowing the city to thrive. And next slide, please. So this means, and this is a slide, an image that I took from UNDRR. So shifting from the traditional risk management approach of response and recovery to a proactive one. So putting the focus on active proactively and on prevention, on prevention. So going this one step beyond traditional risk management. Next slide, please. Also, we take this holistic approach, comprehensive approach to all types of system vulnerabilities, regardless whether they are caused by social, technological, or natural risk. And no matter whether they are specific events, such as I was mentioning before, heavy rainfalls, or persistent stresses that have to do more with the city, also with the capacities or the features of the city, and more internal stresses and vulnerabilities, such as an economic crisis, job insecurity, or lack of affordable housing, which is actually one of the main concerns that we have. And also what we want to do is improve the knowledge and build capacity within the organization, better understanding the nature of risks that we have, and also how the urban system is effective. And this entails a great deal of self-assessment and evaluation of what has happened, but also how we could react to things we can foresee in the future, such as, for instance, the impact of climate change. And next slide, please. So also we take a systems thinking, a complex systems thinking approach. This is a slide where we want to show, and this comes from this blackout event that I mentioned in the beginning that happened in 2007. If the electrical system, the power supply system of the city fails, next slide please, there can be other services that can be compromised, such as water, water supply, or the telecommunication. So thinking or incorporating these interconnections within the different infrastructures and urban services is also part of the process, and a change of paradigm that we needed to undertake. And next slide, please. So this is the resilience process in a nutshell, and we always describe it as a continuous improvement process where once we complete the cycle, we are in a better position to face the risk that we have, or that we can foresee we can suffer. And it works in these two lines that I mentioned. On the one hand, better understanding how prepared we are and trying to extract all the experience that we can from previous crises that we have experienced. So we register the critical events that we have, we assess how we have responded, and from that impact analysis, then we can extract learnings and areas of improvement that we then try to transform into specific projects to implement. And also, on the other hand, we do this prognosis and we analyze future possible risk. And also the same way, this informs, or this is one of the inputs that we take in order to prioritize actions. And then we have this governance body, which currently is the Municipal Resilience Committee, which is an internal task force involving all the different managerial areas of the city, and it's led at the highest executive level. So the municipal manager is the leader of the committee, and involves all the different areas. And this is a space for discussing risk and the vulnerabilities, and prioritizing actions that we then need to implement through these different working groups that we coordinate. And lastly, next slide, please. I just wanted to end my presentation with two examples of projects that we have been implementing or are currently implementing. One of them is the Resilience Atlas. So all these prognosis that we do, all this research that we undertake on how risks are affecting us or can affect us in the future, we collect all this information, and we make sure that this information is available within the organization, and well, at some point this will be publicly available. But the thing is that we have constructed this atlas, which is a web page where we load all the information on all the risk cartography that we produce, and we make sure that all this knowledge is something that the organization can take advantage of and can take into account whenever thinking of these planning, transformational processes, or even operational when we think of services management. This information can be on risk, can be taken into account. And next slide, please. The last project is something that we are currently developing, and which is the critical episode register and the impact assessment on the most critical episodes. So we want to have a register of the annual episodes that we have had, so that this timeline that we saw is not something that only takes into account, or we do by the things we remember, which have been the most critical ones, but do it in a systemic way. So register all the episodes that we have had, and then undertake a more thorough analysis on the ones that have been more critical, so that we can extract this knowledge that I was mentioning before on what areas need to be improved, or even what we are doing well, because you also need to put in value the things that we are doing well, because we need to continue doing them. Because sometimes, and people who work in municipalities will understand well, when we have shortages in budgets, there is a tendency of maybe reducing the budgets of areas of maintenance or things that maybe are not so visible. So we need also to make this visible, because it's important. And sometimes the invisibility of resilience is that when nothing happens, you're not aware that all of the things that are being implemented, so that when a crisis hits, it doesn't have any impact and it's not perceived. So yeah, with this, I think I'm going to finish because I'm aware of time, and I'm sorry that I may have gone a bit long. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ms. Masip, for sharing Barcelona's arrangements and approach as well, and some of the use of risk information there at the end as well. So thank you for that. And thanks to our speakers for keeping time. I want to turn now to questions from the floor. So maybe we can take a round of questions if that's okay with everyone. So please just raise your hand if you'd like to ask any of the panelists a question, or if you have an observation. Yes, we'll just get a mic to you. It's just coming. And then we'll go to Loy after that, and a gentleman in the middle. So just introduce yourself first, please.
Yeah. Good afternoon. Thank you for your presentation. I'm Philippe Garnier. I'm an architect researcher from France. I'm working in a disaster risk reduction issue and so on. We all use the concept of urban recovery, but I would like to know a little bit about what we encompass. If we take the example of Haiti that was given by Mrs. Riley, the first things that happened after the earthquake is that most of the people moved to the urban areas. And if we consider only urban recovery without surrounding areas, it's something that it's a short vision, I would say. But I'm pretty sure that this is something that you have encompassed in your thought, yourself and the other panelists. That means I would like to know a little bit more about this aspect of perimeters of urban situation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And let's go to Loy next.
Yeah, no, I just appreciate the two presentations which I heard, three presentations which I heard. So let me just direct questions at two people for now. One is Elizabeth, and the other is the lady from Barcelona. So, tell us a little bit more, apart from reconstruction, which of course you're doing a great job, and considering you've got 20 countries, what you're doing on preparedness, anticipation, and resilience building. So that's one quick question. And I think Barcelona, you spoke in very rich depth about what you're doing, both on resilience building and a little bit on preparedness. So thanks for that, but give us one or two key lessons and how we can approach you if we are to take this further. Because there are many other cities which need help. And we know that Barcelona is one of the capitals of the world which has been active on resilience building.
Thanks, Loy. And the lady behind.
Hi, thank you. I'm Smriti from Slum Dwellers International. We are here with our colleagues from WRC5 Commission, and we are from the Grassroots Assembly, and we have a lot of women representatives here with us who are from informal settlements. So thank you for your presentations. What I would like to ask is, where do you see is the need for data that is collected and owned by communities in this process that you've been talking about? Because I know that, Elizabeth, you spoke about the challenges of informal settlements and bringing preparedness in these communities. We know that we don't have data that is there specifically on informal settlements across different countries. And we work with communities who own and they make their representation with the local governments, national and at the global level. So where do you think that in your countries you are with data on informal settlements?
And let's, the final question, the gentleman there, yeah.
Thank you very much. Arnel Capili from Build Change. We're social enterprise advocating resilient housing. We've been talking about Build Back Better since 2005. It was a term introduced by President Clinton. I don't think I know my history, just Google it. So it was introduced at that time, and we're still talking about it today, which we know for a fact that building back better it's very costly. So my question is, what does it take to change the mindset, to change the conversation so that we can build better before? Investing more from an infrastructure system approach. For instance, in our research, we know that to strengthen a house, it would take about $2,000 to about $9,000 US to strengthen a house, and that's less costly than actually building back better. Thank you very much.
Great, thank you for that. Why don't we start with Ms. Riley, and if you're happy to take the three questions. There was one on recovery of surrounding areas, the peri-urban question, some examples on preparedness and resilience building that Loy had, and then I think from the representative from slum dwellers on the need for data and community engagement.
Okay, thanks very much, Chair, and thank you to the participants for the questions. Really excellent questions, I must say. Okay, so on the first point on the geographical scope, this is a very important question because the definitions of the urban areas vary, don't they, from country to country, and it really is guided by national governments. So with respect to the parameters for urban recovery, this is really a national level conversation and it's guided nationally. And just to say that from the SEDIMA perspective, recovery really is a national responsibility, and we provide a supporting context for the state. So not a very good answer for you, but just to say that it's really determined by government and how their definition, how far their definition geographically extends. Okay, so with respect to the question on this side, yes, thank you. And you had asked the question about the preparedness, anticipation, resilience building. So we work with our countries on community resilience. And to me, the community resilience interventions are very important in looking at preparedness, anticipatory actions within within all communities, but within urban communities, because that's what we're discussing here. I think there's a lot of aspects around this because, let's say in the context of where you have lead time on hazards and you're talking about matters like life-saving, access to shelters, appropriate shelters. This comes into the conversation, especially in scenarios where we know that the type of construction in informal settlements is not what you want it to be. So there's a lot of work done here by SEDIMA. We give a lot of guiding context to our states, and it's really implemented through national level programming. So there's a lot of components here, including exercises as well. In some countries, they do exercises, drills, etc., depending on the location of some of these settlements, etc. So, really good question asked on this matter of data and what do we have available, and my response is that it varies. The reason why it varies is that it depends on the level of the sensitivity, doesn't it? So we have situations where there are informal settlements in the Caribbean that may predominantly be occupied by undocumented migrants. It is very challenging to get full pictures in that type of a context because you really have to develop some level of trust to be able to get that information, and there's risk associated with revealing that information that you're undocumented, etc. And this has posed a challenge for us in some scenarios, even in the context of COVID, where even though indications were given by national governments, most governments across the Caribbean region indicated that basically they would not take any negative actions if persons who are undocumented came forward to be vaccinated, for example, or came forward to be tested. There's still this issue of the trust. So you don't get very clear pictures with respect to that. However, you do have some countries where you have pretty decent data on what is happening in the informal settlements, who's there, the kind of needs and requirements. So it varies. And did you want me to take the fourth one, Steve?
No,
You're
let
going to
me
go
pass
to
that
another?
over, yeah.
Okay, sure.
So thank you for that, Elizabeth. That was great. Maybe on the same vein, we can go back to Barcelona and ask if Ms. Masig has any lessons or reflections, just briefly on those points.
Yeah, well, I understand we were asked what lessons we have learned also through these years working on trying to implement resilience in our municipality. And the first thing that came to my mind is that you cannot eliminate risk, so there's no risk zero, and also you cannot be prepared for all sort of risk. I mean, you have to embrace uncertainty, and the COVID pandemics was an example of that. So what I extract from this is that well, we cannot foresee all the different scenarios that we can find. This is impossible, but we can prepare the city. We can try to make the city stronger, because ultimately resilience is a capacity of the city, of the system. So we need to try, and it has to do with adaptability, with flexibility. Also, we're reducing root vulnerabilities such as inequality, poverty. So we need to, I think, to work on that, or focus needs to be on that, so that we have a better prepared city, or a city that is very prepared to face whatever may come. Because if we have a stronger city, a more cohesive society with a more equitable society, we will be in a better position to face any sort of risk. So this is one of the things that I can say we can learn. So putting the focus or the stress on this proactive resilience approach, I would say.
Thank you. And now let's turn to that last question around Build Back Better, since, I think it was after the Haiti earthquake that Clinton made that, coined the term. So maybe we can turn to our professors. Let's start with Dr. Yang, and then we can go to Professor Tope as well. So Dr. Yang, what are your thoughts?
Thank you. So I try to respond to this question from my perspective and experience. Basically, this is a cost-benefit analysis. Yeah, of course, we know that like a pre-disaster investment is more efficient than post-disaster investment. We had a lot of research on top of it. But the problem is always like how much is appropriate. Yeah, so talking about this risk assessment is critical. And especially for some hazards such as floods, hurricanes, I think how to incorporate climate change into risk assessment should be especially important when we are making investment and when we are designing building codes. And another thing I want to mention is I strongly suggest that most of our countries should have a updating mechanism, like the more frequent updating mechanism for building codes and standards. Because previously, yes, our building codes well updated, like after a certain long time. But right now, with more climate change, more severe climate change, so it's necessary for us to revisit this building codes and standards in a shorter term, and also consider this in our planning, design, and investment. Yeah.
Great, thank you, Dr. Yang. And then let me pass over now to Professor Tope.
And thank you. I agree with our discussion today, that we must build our infrastructure or house in, for example, in Central Sulawesi, because disaster resistant, but I think the cost we need a lot of money for cost to better our infrastructure or our house. That is yes.
Okay, thank you very much. And we've run over time quite a bit, so apologies for that, but I thought it was important that we took some questions before we wrapped it up. So thank you to all of our speakers for joining us today. Thanks to participants. I guess my key takeaway is really around the importance of risk governance arrangements. I think that was a thread through all of the presentations, the investment ex ante, and really linking it to that critical role of planning. Because, yeah, I mean, as the last question pointed to, of course, prevention is better, but the reality is we continue to need to recover. So how we invest in that and how we plan for that is really critical. So thank you very much, and I'd close the session.